I was sipping stale community center coffee that tasted like regret and burnt filters when I saw him, Marcus Langley, walking down the oak-lined path like a man heading to his own execution. No blazer, no laptop bag, just that tiny manila folder he always carried with those stupid green post-it tabs poking out the side like little flags of surrender. He didn't look scared. He didn't look angry. He just looked hollowed out, like someone had reached in and scooped the soul clean out of the guy. And then I saw her, Debbie Carlson, our HOA president, already waiting for him by the double glass doors of the clubhouse with that signature smug little head tilt that always screamed, "This will only take a minute, sweetie." She held the paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. She just cashed in on everyone else's misery. "This is immediate removal from the board," she announced loud enough for the whole Saturday morning crowd of joggers and dog walkers to hear. "Your access to the HOA portal has already been disabled. Effective right now." Marcus didn't flinch. He just nodded once, the same way you nod when the dentist says the cavity is worse than expected. They didn't even give him the dignity of a private chat. No box of his stuff, no handshake, just 2 clicks on Debbie's iPad and his photo blown up grainy and pathetic on the community bulletin board before he'd even made it past the flagpole. The words "removed," "do not rehire or reinstate" slapped underneath in screaming red Arial bold like a mugshot for the neighborhood watch. My stomach twisted. You don't do that to a guy like Marcus. Not unless you want a whole, carefully manicured lie of Sunnyvale Meadows to start cracking open. Quick note before I keep going. If you're the type who lives for stories where HOA karma hits like a freight train and the quiet neighbor nobody listened to ends up holding the detonator, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button and drop a like. It keeps us bringing you these tales that make you want to scream at your screen, cheer like a maniac, and maybe finally tell your own HOA Karen where she can stick her 3-inch grass height rule. Back to Marcus. Tina at the front desk was already whispering when he passed. They didn't even wait for the state compliance window to close. Isn't that like illegal or something? But Debbie didn't care. She and her little clipboard brigade had already moved on to purging him from every system like he'd never existed. Portal access gone. Email list wiped. One tech guy even said they revoked his key fob mid-swipe. I knew something was deeply off when Marcus didn't fight it. Didn't ask why. Just slipped that folder under his arm and kept walking like he was late for a dentist appointment he'd already paid for. I'd served on the board with Marcus for almost 4 years. He was the kind of guy who read every footnote of every covenant, the kind who didn't speak unless the silence itself needed correcting. If he didn't say anything now, it wasn't because he had nothing to say. It was because he was letting the rope tighten around the neck that deserved it. I remember the way Debbie's voice chased him out the door like cheap perfume. "We've updated your profile. Marcus, you won't be back." Her tone was giddy, like she just landed the cover of HOA Monthly, not just kicked out the one man who actually understood the state compliance playbook we were all barely pretending to follow. The thing is, Marcus wasn't flashy. Never raised his voice. He documented everything silently, thoroughly. The kind of man who left breadcrumb trails not because he expected to need them, but because he knew someday someone else would. And if Debbie thought his silence was surrender, she was about to learn the hard way that Marcus Langley didn't do exit interviews. He did autopsies, and she had just handed him the corpse of her own little empire. At exactly 9:03 the next morning, the first hairline crack formed. It didn't come from a dramatic confrontation or some angry export email blast. No, it came from the state compliance dashboard, a quiet little shared portal we all pretended didn't exist until a violation notice popped up or the annual audit got flagged. On most days, it sat there humming in the background. Green lights, status checks, peaceful suburban silence. But that morning, one light blinked blood red. Primary compliance liaison Marcus Langley. Status active in state registry. Internal note removed. Do not reinstate. The state auditor, a no-nonsense woman named Ron Feldman from the Department of Community Affairs, known more for her oatmeal cardigans than her drama, clicked twice, frowned, then leaned in. The liaison database wasn't synced. Marcus's credentials were still live on the state end, still tied to our ongoing annual compliance review we'd been juggling for 6 months. The same review Marcus had flagged repeatedly for needing a formal transition plan. The same one Debbie had waved off as not that serious. Ron typed one calm sentence into the shared support channel. Not angry, not accusatory, just protocol. This liaison appears marked as removed on internal HOA records. Please confirm reassignment protocol per Section 6B. Section 6B. God help us. It was the kind of clause people skimmed during orientation right before signing the last page of the 47-page covenant packet nobody ever reads. But Marcus had read it, lived by it, breathed it. That clause said plain as daylight that if the designated state compliance liaison is removed during an active audit, the HOA must file pre-clearance replacement and hand over certification 48 hours before removal. No wiggle room. No oops. No Debbie discretion. We didn't do that. Hell, I doubt Debbie even knew Section 6B existed. She, queen of your flag is 2 inches too high, had probably been too busy practicing her I'm just enforcing the rules deer smile in the mirror to check whether the man she just ghosted had any open state ties. And now that oversight had gone digital on a system time-stamped by the state itself. By 9:17 a.m., the HOA legal counsel had seen the ticket. Their reply was fast but shaky. We are reviewing internal records to verify status. Thank you for your patience, which was legalese for oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. At 9:24, someone tried to manually delete Marcus's name from the registry. The system blocked it. Pending audit. Contact state liaison. And guess what? That liaison was still Marcus. The clubhouse meeting room got graveyard quiet. It started tracing logins. Legal asked for every document Marcus had touched in the last 30 days. Nobody said it out loud, but you could feel the panic crawling up everyone's spine like poison ivy. We didn't just remove a board member. We removed the lock. And now the only key was somewhere we couldn't reach. I sat at my kitchen table watching the group chat thread light up like a Christmas tree on fire. And I thought about the manila folder. The green tabs always meant state compliance. He took it with him. Not angrily. Deliberately. Like he knew the system would blink red. Like he counted on it. We thought we could cut Marcus Langley out like dead weight, but we just severed the safety line without checking if we were still attached to the cliff. And now, down below, something was starting to shift. A gentle breeze before the landslide. By 10:05 a.m., the panic was still polite, still dressed in pastel cardigans and pretending to be under control. Legal had its war room huddle in the clubhouse, and everyone spoke in low tones and acronyms, but you could feel it in the air. Something foundational had shifted, and we weren't standing on solid ground anymore. First thing they did was send Lacey, junior counsel fresh out of law school and still clutching a mechanical pencil like it gave her superpowers, to call Marcus's cell. She dialed 3 times. No answer. No voicemail. Just that long, hollow silence that makes you feel like maybe the person on the other end is listening, just choosing not to respond. Lacey looked up with that nervous half-smile, like maybe someone else would want to try. Debbie waved her off without missing a beat. "We don't owe him anything," she said loud enough for the room to hear. "He was at will on the board. Removal was legal. He doesn't hold any privileges post-exit." The room nodded, half out of habit, half because nobody wanted to poke the bear. But one person didn't move. Gerald Lang, our general counsel, mid-60s, graying mustache, looked like a man born in a 3-piece suit. His hand hovered over his coffee mug, eyes narrowed, not blinking. He didn't look at Debbie. He just reached behind him and pulled out the one thing none of us had seen in years, the red compliance binder, the real one, the one Marcus used to update himself, the one legal hadn't touched since we switched to the cloud and started pretending protocol was optional. He flipped to a tab near the back. Section 11C. His finger traced the words out loud. Removal of a named compliance liaison during active audit periods shall constitute a presumptive breach unless pre-cleared by the state. The room went very still. Debbie, suddenly not as smug, muttered, "That's probably outdated." But Gerald shook his head slowly. "We never rescinded the designation. Marcus was the named liaison on the Q4 state compliance review. His removal without notice is a documented breach." Lacey whispered, "But if we can show it was accidental," Gerald snapped. "The section doesn't care about intention, only protocol. The minute we revoked his portal access without state pre-clearance, we breached continuity." Debbie blinked like the words didn't compute. "But we already updated his profile. We marked him inactive." "That's the problem," Gerald said quietly. "You did it too soon." I could feel the blood drain from every face in the room, because now it wasn't just a removed board member or a broken portal. It was a presumptive state breach with teeth, fines, investigations, and a nice fat stain on every homeowner's quarterly newsletter from now until the end of the year. Debbie tried again. "Can't we just say it was an internal systems error? We'll put someone else in his place now." "Who?" Gerald asked. "Do they have state clearance? Do they have a signed liaison transition log? Are they registered with the Department of Community Affairs?" No one answered because the truth was simple. No one replaced Marcus. Debbie just deleted him like a bad group text thread. But state systems don't delete. They timestamp. And that timestamp just told the audit trail that we removed our only qualified liaison mid-review without so much as a heads up. And Marcus? He wasn't saying a word, which, coming from him, was worse than shouting. It meant he'd already read this page and decided to let us turn it ourselves. It started with a routine inquiry. At least that's how Derek from IT described it. Just a normal sweep, checking the residual syncs for Marcus's deactivated credentials. But by the time he reached the third mirror directory and stopped mid-scroll, his tone shifted. I heard it myself. He came into the coffee area pale and scratching behind his ear like he was trying to scrub something off his brain. "Did you know he had full dual access clearance?" He asked nobody in particular. "I processed the deactivation request myself." Someone mumbled, "Wasn't that just for remote rule checks?" Derek shook his head. "Sure, that's what it was called. But the folders on his local drive weren't just mirror images. They were versioned, time-stamped. He didn't just download the most recent files. He downloaded specific ones. 72, to be exact. That number hit me like a slap. 72. Last month, the state auditor had sent us a pre-flag summary. 72 anomalies, minor inconsistencies in enforcement logs, selective fine waivers, unvetted vendor contracts, a couple of access point slips that breezed past monthly credential audits. Nothing that screamed scandal until you consider them together. Marcus had that much was obvious now. Legal had been scrambling for 24 hours to clean up the liaison mismatch without triggering a full state alert. But now we discovered that Marcus, who'd been quietly building those audit packets for weeks, had preserved every single flag document. And he took them with him. Not in some shady off-site heist. He'd done it by the book. His access was still live when he walked out. His status still cleared. The backups consistent with the state's own continuity protocols. So no, it wasn't illegal, but it was intentional, deliberate, controlled. And suddenly, every board member in that pastel-painted room started wondering the same thing. Did he know? Did Marcus see the writing on the wall before any of us? Did he anticipate Debbie's little performance, Gerald's binder panic, Lacey's useless calls? Did he catalog 72 separate compliance failures, back them up, and then wait for us to kick him out without noticing the grenade we just unpinned? Debbie was the first to scoff. Even if he has them, he's still under NDA. He can't do anything with them. Gerald raised an eyebrow. If the state subpoenas him as named liaison, that NDA is irrelevant. He's not a whistleblower. He's a cooperating authority. Her smirk vanished so fast I thought it snapped a neck vertebra. I remember the last board meeting Marcus worked late. Everyone else was already halfway through happy hour at the clubhouse bar, but he was still in his little compliance corner, scanning page after page with headphones in. He didn't rush. He wasn't stalling. He was finishing something. Derek dropped a thumb drive on the table. His terminal kept an offline cache too. Do we want to see what he didn't sync? Lacey said no. Gerald said yes. I said nothing because I already knew. This wasn't a disgruntled ex-board member with a grudge. This was Marcus Langley, detail man, bylaw hound, paper trail surgeon. And if he left with 72 files, then every single one of them had a purpose, a pattern, a pulse. He didn't just walk out with a folder. He walked out with a mirror. And the reflection was about to start screaming. By Friday morning, it was no longer just a situation. It had mutated into something slower, colder, and far more dangerous, like an ice shelf cracking under its own weight. Legal had gone from tense whispers to full-volume triage. And Debbie, she wasn't parading her clipboard anymore. She was locked behind a closed door with 2 VPs and a sweating paralegal who kept running out of breath. The board had tried to deflect it, tried to bury it, and now the lawyers were trying to contain it. And Marcus? Marcus didn't say a damn word. One of the senior partners, Leland Strauss, a man so old he still used a landline in his office, left a message himself, not his assistant. The same guy who once scoffed that compliance was an overpaid alarm clock. Now his voice trembled ever so slightly as it hit Marcus's voicemail with manufactured casualness. Hi, Marcus. This is Leland Strauss with HOA Counsel. We'd like to confirm you understand your obligations around proprietary data and confidentiality under Section 12 of your separation paperwork. Please return our call. Nothing. No callback. No email. Not even a read receipt. Just static. By early afternoon, the silence had its own weight. Gerald paced near the printer like something might materialize to save us. Meanwhile, I watched a junior assistant from facilities quietly remove Marcus's nameplate from the compliance cubicle, as if that would erase him from the state audit log. Then, at exactly 3:15 p.m., the hammer fell. A formal inquiry arrived at the HOA's registered legal inbox, stamped and signed from the State Department of Community Affairs. The kind of thing that doesn't get sent unless someone in the Capitol is very, very unhappy. It read, "To whom it may concern, we have been informed that the registered compliance liaison of record, Mr. Marcus Langley, has been removed. Our records show no filed pre-clearance notification nor reassignment log per Section 6B. Please submit revised audit logs and supporting rationale within 48 hours. Failure to comply may result in temporary suspension of governance certification privileges." I swear I heard Gerald's jaw clench. You don't get 48 hours from a state unless you're already being treated like a liability. It meant they weren't asking out of curiosity. They were building a paper trail. And here's what twisted the knife deeper. Marcus didn't leak anything. Didn't run to the local news. Didn't drop some viral post about wrongful removal or blow up the HOA on Nextdoor. He just waited. That's what made it worse. The stillness. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't angry. He was just patient. Like he knew the board would talk itself into a corner if he left them alone long enough. It wasn't a bomb. It was a timer. And now we were down to 47 hours, 46 minutes, and 0 exit strategy. At 6:42 a.m., the next morning, before the board had even wiped the sleep from their eyes or brewed their overpriced clubhouse coffee, an email landed in the state agency's inbox. No subject line fluff. No pleasantries. Just one quiet surgical transmission sent directly to the lead auditor from Marcus Langley. Attachment. Clause 8B/handoff dispute.pdf. I didn't see the contents firsthand, but I watched Gerald read it. The way his mouth drew tight. The way he slowly lowered his glasses like gravity had doubled. Then he handed it to Lacey without a word and walked straight into the executive boardroom, face pale and stunned like a man who just realized his parachute was stitched together with lies. Lacey muttered while reading, "Oh my God." The attachment was an email chain 6 months old, time-stamped, clean, polite, and devastating. Marcus had flagged repeatedly that the board had refused to implement the new audit handoff procedure required for external compliance liaison. Specifically, he'd warned that if he were ever removed from his post without a cleared, state-registered replacement, the governance designation would lapse. The email showed legal agreeing in principle, but punting the responsibility to Debbie. Debbie, of course, punted it into the sun. And at the bottom of that chain, like a sniper's bullet aimed squarely at the HOA's legal spine, sat Section 8B from the state covenant. In absence of a designated replacement with cleared status, data handling and enforcement authority shall be considered unsecured. All activity under unsecured conditions shall be presumed non-compliant pending audit resolution. We weren't just behind on a form. We weren't just in a protocol gray zone. We were unsecured. That meant every fine we'd issued, every vendor contract we'd signed, every rule enforcement that had occurred since the moment Marcus's portal access was disabled was now presumptively invalid. And not because he said so, because the state said so. That email didn't go through us. It bypassed every firewall, every PR consultant, every corrective action draft we were about to force-feed the regulators. The state saw it before we even knew it existed, which meant the narrative wasn't ours anymore. It belonged to the evidence. And Marcus had written it 6 months ago. Gerald came out of the boardroom looking like a ghost. "They're going to freeze us," he muttered. "There's no wiggle room in Section 8B. It's self-triggering. Automatic." Debbie tried to argue, said something about interpretive leniency and good faith internal restructuring, but the damage was baked in. The state doesn't care about good faith. It cares about continuity. And ours have been obliterated by a woman too proud to click reply all and an entire board too arrogant to listen when the quietest person in the room handed them a flashlight and said, "You're heading into a cave. You might want this." I sat back and watched the chaos ripple outward. Phones started ringing. A VP swore under his breath and said something about pushing the community grant timeline. Someone from finance asked if the freeze would affect the escrow release for next quarter's road repairs. And somewhere in all that noise, I thought about Marcus again. He hadn't gone scorched earth. He hadn't hacked anything. He didn't burn bridges or make threats. He had simply left a trail of truth behind and waited for someone to trip over it. This wasn't revenge. This was architecture. The boardroom was a silent tomb by the time Gerald walked in, shoulders heavy like he was dragging a coffin instead of a leather folio. Nobody spoke. Not the treasurer, who suddenly had nothing optimistic to say. Not the investor relations rep who'd flown in to monitor the grant negotiations. Not even Debbie, who now stared at her manicured nails like they held the secrets of salvation. Gerald didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, eyes bloodshot, voice calm but trembling in that way that made every board member sit up straighter. He laid the envelope down, tan creased, a little warped like it had been mailed and remailed through multiple systems. "We have confirmation," he said, eyes scanning the room. "By removing Mr. Langley without pre-clearance or reassignment protocol, we have violated not one, but two state continuity provisions, Section 6B and 8B. Both now formally logged with the Department of Community Affairs." A few board members exchanged glances. One cleared his throat and muttered, "But the audit hasn't closed." "Couldn't we?" Gerald cut him off with a slow shake of his head. "It's already triggered. The state isn't asking for clarification. They're preparing for inspection. We have 41 hours to produce compliant logs, or they initiate full governance freeze procedures." He reached into the folio and pulled out the envelope. "And there's more." "Where did you get that?" the treasurer asked, voice a mix of dread and hope. "It was mailed to Mr. Langley's legal counsel. They were compelled to submit it under subpoena. Marcus anticipated the state might need a record of his concerns, so he preserved a hard copy of material he already had authorized access to under dual review protocol. It includes the following. He slid 3 sheets across the polished mahogany table. Page 1. A timeline of unflagged enforcement actions across unsecured systems during the transition period. 32 instances, each one mapped to a known state compliance timestamp. Page 2. A list of third-party contractors granted access during the lapse. Half of them never vetted under our own standards. 3 of them red-flagged under vendor review 6 months ago. I watched one of the directors, the man who always bragged about running risk mitigation, pull his chair back like the evidence might physically bite him. And page 3, Gerald lifted the last sheet with 2 fingers. It was short, just one typed sentence above Marcus's familiar signature. Please consult 6B before next steps. That was it. No threats. No grand declarations. Just one line, clean and cold as steel. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. A junior board member asked if this could be contained. Gerald didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. The state has already frozen preliminary certifications. If we can't produce corrected handover logs and updated liaison documentation by Monday, we're looking at full operational suspension. If they escalate to the enforcement office, he stopped, swallowing hard. We could lose our governance license permanently. Someone cursed under their breath. Another stood and paced, running fingers through her hair like it might stimulate divine intervention. The treasurer finally spoke. So what's the play? Damage control PR? Can we spin this? Gerald just looked at him with something between pity and contempt. No, you can't spin state procedure. You comply with it or you drown. The boardroom fractured then, half of them shouting, the other half already dialing their assistants, brokers, anyone who might offer a parachute before impact. But none of them noticed me, sitting quietly, watching it all, because I'd seen the moment this began. It wasn't when Marcus walked out. It was when nobody asked what he took with him. And now they knew. He didn't take data. He took the oxygen and left the matches behind. The first grant sponsor pulled out before noon. No warning. No last-minute negotiation. Just a curt email from the State Community Improvement Fund. In light of regulatory instability and unresolved certification matters, we are suspending all transaction activity until further notice. A second followed within the hour. Then a third. All of them circling the same drain, repeating the same phrase, regulatory instability. That's the phrase they use when your compliance officer becomes a state exhibit. By 2 p.m., the pending park renovation grant, something the treasurer had practically tattooed on his chest for the last 3 quarters, was on ice. Publicly, they called it paused. Privately, every homeowner on the emergency email blast heard the truth. You're toxic now. No agency wants to fund an HOA staring down a possible suspension of its enforcement authority. It's like buying a house already half swallowed by a sinkhole. The state's recommendation came in at 3:06 p.m. Not a final judgment, but close enough to send the clubhouse into chaos. Due to unresolved liaison gaps and non-compliant governance continuity, the agency recommends a precautionary freeze of current certifications pending full compliance review. It was all happening. The trigger Marcus had warned about 6 months ago, now blooming like a slow-motion detonation in every department from enforcement to landscaping contracts. Vendor dashboards started auto-locking. Residents demanded reassurances we didn't have. Even the internal fine tracking system went into partial lockdown, pending re-verification of permissions. Someone tried calling Marcus again, not Lacey this time. She'd burned that bridge already. This time it was Gerald himself. He didn't even bother pretending it was about liability or protocol. He asked Marcus through his attorney if he would be willing to participate in a cooperative transition for the purposes of restoring state standing. Translation: we'll stop pretending you don't exist if you will just sign this paper and make the audit go away. The response came 22 minutes later. Short. Surgical. Dear Marcus, per my former status, all responsibilities ceased the moment you revoked access. That was it. No anger. No flourish. Just a mirror turned gently toward them. Debbie, who once bragged that compliance officers were just backup dancers in the Real Board show, finally left the building with her face down and her email set to out of office indefinitely. Half the board was huddled with crisis PR strategists who couldn't spin what was essentially self-inflicted sabotage. Gerald looked 10 years older, and the treasurer just sat behind his desk rereading old grant updates like they might turn back into truth. And all the while Marcus didn't move, didn't run toward them, didn't try to bargain for revenge or leverage. Because he didn't need them. Never did. The whole HOA had been built around the illusion that they could replace anyone, streamline anyone, erase anyone. But Marcus, he wasn't anyone. He was the quiet breath between systems, the pause between clauses, the man who knew that sometimes you don't need to burn an HOA down. You just need to stop holding it up. Marcus sat by the window in a quiet co-working loft off Maple and Jefferson. Third floor, corner seat, far enough from the espresso machine that the noise blurred into white hum. No suit, no badge, just him, a half-empty mug, and a second-hand laptop patch with state sticker residue from 3 contracts ago. Outside, the world moved on like it always did, buses screeching, kids on scooters nearly taking out a flower cart. But inside that little room, the air felt still. Finished. Clean. He refreshed the news feed once, just out of habit. There it was. Regulatory inquiry delays, major community grant for Sunnyvale Meadows HOA amid governance gaps. Below the headline, the article ticked through bullet points like a slow drip. Sponsor withdrawal. Temporary license hold. Formal investigation into procedural irregularities during active audit cycles. No mention of him by name. No spotlight. But the shadow of his work hung in every line. His phone vibrated just once. A new email. Subject, Director of Compliance Opportunity. Hi, Marcus. Saw your name on the registry and was impressed by your track record. We're building a new division with compliance at the center. No red tape, no posturing, just clean work, real authority. Interested in chatting. He smiled. Not smug, not gloating. Just that quiet, tired grin of someone who saw the wreckage and knew it could have been avoided if someone, anyone, had just listened before deciding to erase him. He clicked reply. Let's talk after the hearing. No hurry. The state would finish its process as it always did. No cutting corners. No whispered favors. Just a ledger updated with truth. Marcus didn't need revenge. He'd already built something better. The silence had been the strategy. The exit just timing. The aftermath, that was theirs to carry. He closed the laptop gently, took one last sip of now cold coffee, and looked out the window like a man watching the tide go out after a storm. Not because he missed what was there, but because it proved he was right to leave before it drowned. They posted his photo like a warning. But he had something better.